Hi, my name is Jon Svitak, attorney with the Shannon Law Group, and our firm helps people across the United States recover financially and emotionally after they experience an injury or side effect due to a vaccine. And we do this by pursuing compensation on their behalf in the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. So right around September, October of every year, millions of people are going to go and get their annual flu shot. And for the majority of these people, when they get their shot, in either their left or their right deltoid, they may experience some general soreness in the area of the injection site that can last a couple of days, maybe even 3-4 days. And after that, the soreness goes away and there's no ill effects of the flu shot after that. However, some individuals continue to experience pain in that area and it doesn't get any better, it actually gets worse. If your symptoms have persisted for a week, maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, there's a possibility that you've experienced an injury called SIRVA, or shoulder injury related to vaccine administration. SIRVA occurs when the vaccine is either administered in the wrong spot or at the wrong angle or perhaps too deeply into your shoulder. And what happens is the structure of your shoulder becomes inflamed. So the tendons, the ligaments, or the bursa of your shoulder joint becomes inflamed. And what you would experience if this happened to you is, number one, pain. And this may be, and likely will be, more painful than just general soreness after a vaccine. So if you go in and get your flu shot and you think to yourself, that was the most painful flu shot that I've ever received, that may be a sign that you have a SIRVA injury. On top of that, though, the pain won't go away. It'll get worse. And the pain will be associated with range of motion restrictions and limitations. So if you can't raise your arm above your head or behind your back, and reaching for your seatbelt even produces pain, then that's a sign that it could be a SIRVA injury. You may also experience decreased strength in your shoulder. So if you can't lift that gallon of milk as easily as you did before the vaccine, might be a sign that you have a SIRVA injury. And finally, there could, because this is an inflammation type injury, your shoulder might become red or swollen after you get the flu shot. And these are all symptoms of a potential SIRVA injury. So if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, and it's been a week or 2 weeks since you received the flu shot, it'd be a good idea to go to the doctor and report your symptoms. Tell him or her, I got this flu shot, and ever since, my arm hasn't been the same, my shoulder hasn't been the same. Some doctors aren't aware of SIRVA, but SIRVA isn't actually a medical diagnosis anyway. So if you tell them what your symptoms are, most likely they're going to treat it like any other shoulder injury. And SIRVA can be associated with many different diagnoses. So it could be a rotator cuff type injury, it could be tendinitis, bursitis, frozen shoulder, or adhesive capsulitis. Any one of these diagnoses can be a sign of a SIRVA injury, especially if it happens in close proximity to your vaccination. So if you go to your doctor, you get one of these diagnoses, most likely you're going to be recommended for conservative treatment in the beginning. And that can include pain medications, anti-inflammatory medications, and a course of physical therapy. If after 6 to 8 weeks of physical therapy you haven't had any improvement in your symptoms, and actually the symptoms are either staying the same or getting worse, your doctor might try a cortisone shot injection. This is a way to kind of reduce the inflammation in your shoulder so that maybe you get more of a benefit out of your therapy. If cortisone shot injection doesn't help your symptoms and you've reached a plateau in your therapy, unfortunately the next step would be to consider a surgical option, to actually go in arthroscopically to try and repair, if it's a rotator cuff injury, try and repair a tear to the rotator cuff, try to debride the area of any inflammation in your bursa, if it's like a frozen shoulder type situation. And obviously after surgery, you're looking at post-surgery recovery, which usually includes therapy as well. So it all depends on the nature and extent of your injury, and there are ways, examinations, MRIs, of determining what the extent of your injury is. If you believe you've been injured by a vaccine, you do have some legal options. What we do is we file petitions for people in the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. So I do all of our consultations. If you call us and you tell me about a potential injury due to a vaccine, I'll ask you some background questions to try and figure out, is this a case that we can take on? But before we even get to the question of, can we establish, was your injury the result of the vaccine, we first have to determine whether you're eligible for the program. And there's some requirements before we can even file a petition for you. And the first of those would be, did you receive a vaccine that's covered under the program? So there's a list of covered vaccines, and if you received one that's not covered by the program, unfortunately we can't file a petition for you. The other requirement is that the symptoms of your injury have to persist for at least 6 months before we can file. This is called the severity requirement. If your symptoms did not persist for 6 months, the only other way we can file a petition for you is if you were hospitalized as a result of the vaccine injury and underwent a surgical procedure. Those are the two ways that you can satisfy the severity requirement. The third eligibility requirement is that you received your vaccine within the United States. There's a few exceptions to that rule, but in general, you have to have received your vaccine in the States. Now, if you meet all those requirements, we can go ahead and continue with our consultation to see if it's a case that we can pursue for you. And if it is, what we would then do is start working on your petition. So we would draft your petition with the specific allegations of which condition or injury or diagnosis was caused by whatever vaccine that you received. Now, aside from just drafting the petition, we have to support it with evidence. So we would have to gather all of your medical records, draft some affidavits for you and maybe some family members or friends who are aware of your injury or observed the symptoms of your injury. And then we'd file all of that along with the petition. Once everything that we consider to be supportive of your case has been filed, the government will then begin its review. So somebody from the Department of Health and Human Services will be assigned to review your case, review the evidence, and then come to a determination. Do they concede that yes, this was an injury caused by a vaccine, or are they going to dispute it for some reason? Now, if they dispute the case for a particular reason, doesn't mean that you've lost. It just means that we go in front of a judge and we have to prove it. We have to advocate on your behalf and try and convince the judge that your injury was caused by the vaccine. Now, if we're either successful in doing that or the government concedes that this was a vaccine injury, the next phase of the program is the damages phase, where we determine what compensation you're entitled to. So in general, there are 3 types of compensation. There's out-of-pocket medical expenses, so anything not covered by insurance, co-pays, payments towards a deductible, maybe some medical equipment that wasn't covered or over-the-counter medication, things like that, you can get reimbursed for. If you're out of work because of this injury, any lost earnings, income, wages can be reimbursed through this program. And then finally, there's pain and suffering damages as well. So the pain that you were in during this injury, the impact that it had on your daily life, your activities, your hobbies, all of that goes into determining what your pain and suffering was. And for each of these categories of damages, there's also the potential for future compensation. So if we come to the point where we're going to resolve your case, or the judge is going to enter an award of compensation, if you're still dealing with the effects of the injury, the court can consider future compensation as well. So how would you navigate this program? The best way is to hire an attorney. And the reason why it's the best way is because it's free. You don't pay anything to hire an attorney, and you're not going to pay them anything at the end of your case either. There's no contingency fee, there's no retainer, there's no bills. It's completely free to hire an attorney. And it's a good idea too, because these cases can become complicated. In my experience, the government isn't quick to concede on these vaccine injury cases. If they can find a reason to dispute your case, they'll find it. So it's good to have an attorney with you who can negotiate with the government on the value of your case, who can get in front of the judge and convince them this is a vaccine injury. So it's really a no-brainer to hire an attorney to help you with this. If you'd like to learn more about the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program or your rights, I wrote a book about it. It's called Vaccine Injuries: Understanding the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. You can get yourself a free copy of this book by texting VICP to 312-847-2428, and we'll ship you a free copy.